All right, well, welcome to the Board of Education work session. Today is the 12th of December, 2022, our last work session of the year, and we'll begin with roll call. Ms. Lemon?
Director Bentley?
Present.
Director Campos-Spitzy?
Present.
Director Mesh?
Present.
Director Matthews?
Present.
Director Norwood?
Present.
Director Pappas?
Present.
Director Sullivan?
Present.
All board members present.
Thank you, Ms. Lemon. And we'll begin with board member comments and reports, and Ms. Sullivan, we'll start with you.
I'm just recovering from surgery, so I haven't been out anywhere except for physical therapy, so I have
We are glad to
nothing
have you back.
contribute. Thank you.
Mr. Norwood?
Well, it was CASB week or 10 days ago was a good experience. It was nice to get together with the board and spend some time together and get a chance to meet members from other districts and some of the superintendents from other districts and get some work done. So.
Thanks, sir. You've got a beard since the last time we saw you.
I just don't have any desire to shave. I want to keep my voice warm.
Looks good. Ms. Mash?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I really enjoyed CASB as well. I always find the speakers to have something meaningful and encouraging to say. I also enjoy networking with other board members. I thought I'd share with all of you, I went to the business meeting, and so there was an election for, I think it's probably in that leadership book, or definitely you could find it online, but the districts in Colorado are divided into, I believe, 12 regions, and so we're Region 4. And then on the CASB Board of Directors, there's a number of positions open for, and I think it's based on population. So we have 3 representatives from District 4. Nate Donovan of Poudre School District has 1 year left, and then 2 others were elected to a 3-year term. Deb Gustafson, who's in the district that serves like Keensburg, Loch Bowie, I forget what it's called. She was appointed and then is reelected, and then DJ Anderson, also from Poudre Valley, was elected to a 3-year term. So again, CASB's role is to collectively bargain for the membership for all of the school boards that are a part of Colorado Association of School Boards. They also hired the CASB director, which they're currently looking to fill that position. They're doing a nationwide search. So if you have any questions about any of that bigger CASB entity, I have some added information. If you're not already have a login to the CASB website, they'll also send you weekly emails. Sometimes it's, how to develop policy, how to get along with your board members, how to discuss this topic or that topic, and sometimes there's interview, like for example this week we can sign on to a Zoom call to speak with the Colorado Speaker of the House and the Colorado Head of the Senate. So there's lots of opportunities if you're interested in more of a legislative role.
Thank you, Ms. Mesh. Ms. Pappas?
Thank you. I wish I could be there with you tonight. Welcome, Brenda, to the table. Sorry that I'm missing your first evening. I too enjoyed CASB, and I just wanted to point out how proud we all are of Jilly Wang is our president of the Council of Student Reps. She was actually part of the leadership team at CASB and prepared the day of activities for the students that attended, and it was really a great opportunity to spend time with them at breakfast on Friday morning. And I don't know, we just have some amazing young people in our district, and I want to just point that out. And I think that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Pappas. Mr. Bentley?
It's been a minute. It seems like a month. Maybe it has been a month. I think it's been a month. But basically, the only thing I made it outside of CASB was a Chapel visit. We got to go tour the school and see the small performance. And then CASB, we got to kind of hear a lot of good speakers and kind of for me, it was a lot different than last year, already having a lot bigger basis of what's going on with the school board. So I kind of got to go maybe a little more in depth with some of the stuff, and then I could understand what the heck they were talking about most of the time. Some of those words weren't so scary. So got a lot out of it this year, and glad we went, and excited for the holiday season.
Thank you, Mr. Bentley. And Ms. Campos-Spitzy, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you guys for such a warm welcome. My highlight these last couple weeks was the CASB conference. It was a really special time for me to share about myself to the board, and just it was wonderful to get such a warm welcome from everyone, and the bonding time was excellent. Additionally, I attended all the 101 sessions, so the Finance 101 and Legal 101, and just learned a lot of the basics of what it is to be a school board member in the state of Colorado. So excited to keep learning and build on what I took away from CASB for the next year.
And I don't know that there's much to add on that. I did certainly enjoy CASB, enjoyed getting to know Brenda, enjoyed, as Ms. Pappas said, having our students there. We also had the Northridge JRTC present the colors. So we had a number of students. We are always well represented by our students at CASB. We always have students who are in leadership positions and who are groups that have chosen to play or to present, and it's always a worthwhile time for us. And I went to 101 with Brenda as well, and I think I've done that at least three times, maybe four. But I always learn more about school finance each and every time, and so get a better understanding. It is a lot to take in terms of how funding happens and the bigness of the job. So that's all I've got. I was also at Chapel Oak, and I told Dr. Pilch this, but it is we're in concert season, so first band concert at Chapel Oak since the new performing arts space has been finished, and I think it really is the first time I've ever seen my kids' faces at a band concert, because normally they're up on the stage and we're down, all the audience is flat on the gym floor, and they play trumpet or trombone, so they're not right in the front, they're not playing flute, they're not standing up playing drums. And after I've been there 14 years, and they hadn't been playing in the band the entire time, but and all that time, I do think it's the first time I've ever seen my kids' face at a band concert. So that was great to see, and we again always thankful to our community for that project and all the projects that we have going on. Which brings us right to our next item of business, and that is our calendar review. And the first thing on that calendar review, if everybody, you will have this in your packet, or maybe you can open it online. But the very first thing on the calendar review is another beam topping, and that is this week, 1 o'clock. Is it at Meeker, really?
Oh, that's incorrect. I'm sorry, that was my fault.
That would be at the new CTE Center.
New CTE Center, yeah.
Just north of Billy Martinez.
I was like, we just did a beam topping at Meeker. How many beams can we put on that thing? I guess they were going up. So make a note of that, guys. That's a Jefferson New CTE Center.
Let's check the calendar invite and make sure it's correct. I think it is.
It is true.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, your calendar invite's
calendar's right.
Great.
It will be chilly. And Kent, will they need hard hats and boots and vests?
No, as long as we stay out of construction zone.
Okay.
However, we're going to have to check the wind, maybe.
So that's really about the last thing that we have before Christmas and the New Year. And then very quickly after the New Year, on the 9th we have our next board meeting, and then on the 17th we have a school visit to McAuliffe. And then we have another board meeting on the 23rd, along with our work session. And then we have the Success in 6 awards. Encourage everyone to try to make that if you can. That's always a fun event where we celebrate some of our best teachers and administrators. And then we have another school visit to Jackson on Groundhog Day, 7:25 a.m. on Groundhog Day. So I'm going to stop right there and not go through everything, but is there anything in December or January that we need to be aware of that's not on this?
President Matthews, I think we wanted to kind of check in with the board on January 20th or January 27th for a full day work session to do some work with the entire board around strengths, and we thought we would do some work with the Strength Finder. I'll talk a little bit more about this here in just a minute, and also some work around role of the Board of Education and responsibilities and relationship to the district and that work. So just checking in on, is there anyone who could not do the 20th or the 27th, which would be 8 to 3-ish probably that day.
Is it a one
9
or
to
the
4-ish.
other? It's not both, right?
It's one or the other, yes.
Okay, I would not be available for the 20th.
Okay.
Same here. This is January.
Of January, yes. So no Taylor and no Brenda on the 20th.
I can do either the 27th. I'd have to maybe leave early, but not much.
Okay. All right, so we'll work to get that scheduled. Hearing no other conflicts on the 27th, it looks like that might be the preferred date, Mrs. Lemon. So we'll work with board leadership. So our best hope would be that prior to the 27th, at least a week ahead of time, you will have gone in and have done the Strength Finder. There's a code in your book here that you will utilize to access the Strength Finder, and then we'll work back with Gallup. When you complete it, you'll get your top 5, maybe top 10 strengths. Annette and I we're trying to remember for sure, but we'll work back with Gallup and get your strengths all the way through, and then we'll do some work around with the Strengths Finder on that date. The philosophy behind this work really is that we all have strengths, and it's very easy as leaders to come at our work from our weaknesses or our growth areas, but it's when we know what our strengths are and we can work from our strengths and lean in with our strengths that we can be more effective leaders. And what I have found with our district leadership team and our cabinet team is that knowing our strengths has helped us to communicate better, helped us to understand each other's quirks and needs a little bit better, and has helped us to be a more effective team. So we thought this was a place that we might do some work with our board that day as a part of that day. It certainly will not take the full day to do that work. But it does require you to complete the survey ahead of time, and it's a pretty quick survey. You just go with your gut reaction. There's no right or wrong answers on it. It's just very unique to every individual who takes the Strength Finder.
Thank you, Dr. Filch. So we'll look for the 27th. And moving right along, we are to our state accountability updates related to the state accountability system. Dr. Filch, this one is yours.
Thank you. Ms. Lemon, do I have it on the screen here? Yes. Okay.
We'll escape out and put up the next cover.
Oh, golly. We got to slow this mouse down. All right. Stacy's saying I can run it. How about it, Stacy? You want this to put on there? You got something? That's okay. Thank you for this time to talk a little bit about this tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So what I'm going to share with you is some work that really is a compilation of work that over 24 superintendents have been involved in over the last couple of years. So even pre-pandemic, District 6 was a part of a small consortium of districts. There were 4 or 5 of us who were working with the Colorado Education Initiative to really take a deeper dive at the state accountability system, and to in the end, our hope was to be able to make some recommendations back to the Colorado Department of Ed perhaps back to the legislators to begin to make some adjustments in the state accountability system. Those of you who've been around for a while, you know that this accountability system has been in place now for well over a decade, a couple of decades, with several different iterations and revisions to the system. But what we know, and those of us who've done this work for a while, what we know is it's a pretty blunt tool that relies significantly on one test, one time a year, regardless of what grade level you're at, and that test becomes the predictor and the story for a school district as well as an individual school. And later tonight, you will see in your board meeting the accreditation ratings. You should have seen them in your board packet in your preview ahead of time, but the accreditation ratings, which are primarily, they are based on the current accreditation system that is in place here in Colorado. And what superintendents like myself and others have been advocating for is a much more robust and sophisticated system that looks at students through a multitude of measures and lenses and really tells a story about student achievement in Colorado. So the Denver area school superintendents came together, and let me just take you back. Go ahead, Stace. Okay. Yeah. So we began that work a few years ago, and then the pandemic hit, and that work stopped with the Colorado Education Initiative. And so the superintendents then did some work, and other leaders in the state with the state legislators, and House Bill 21-1294 was passed, and the requirement out of this was that a third-party review would be conducted of the systems and of standards and assessments around our current systems for accountability. And you can see that when this passed, the intent was that it would be completed within a year, which meant by November 15th of 2022. It's important for me to point out that, to our knowledge, that audit is yet not complete. It should have been completed last month. It has not yet been released. The Commissioner of Education, Dr. Katie Anthus, was at our superintendent's meeting up at CASB. She shared with us that she thinks that those results may be released this week, but they have yet to be released. She did not expect that there would be any advance release for her staff or for superintendents prior to it becoming a public document. So knowing that this audit is coming, the superintendents have felt like we still wanted to get our message out there around what we are hoping will become a result of this audit. So the audit was intended to, of course, do what is outlined in the General Assembly, and then to ensure that the current systems do not contain institutional or cultural biases. And that's been a big issue with the current accreditation system, is that you can predict, based on zip code, really how a school is typically going to be accredited. And so we as superintendents and leaders across the state really wanted the audit to take a close look at that. And then we wanted the audit to provide an accurate and critical and comparable assessment of public education throughout the state. So we don't know what this audit is going to say, but the superintendents have been working now for several months, over 18 months now, to really identify what we would like to see in a state accountability system, because we believe this audit's going to be released, and then there will be probably, we would hope, a team of folks come together to design a new accountability system. And so superintendents have come together in hopes of influencing that process, so that we can get a team put in place where there would be superintendent voice in the room, as well as teacher educator voice in the room, parent voice in the room, to influence any future accountability system that might come into Colorado. So to give you an idea of who those Denver area superintendents are, and it's bigger than this, but these are the official members of the Denver Area School Superintendents Coalition, who actually worked on the presentation that I'm sharing with you tonight. And superintendents from all of these districts will be sharing this information either this month or next month with their boards of education, their district accountability committees, and their district leadership teams. In addition to this group of superintendents, the Rural Alliance of Superintendents are also, their voice is also in this and is a piece of this. And some of those folks are folks that are in districts that touch our borders here in Weld County. So the Council of Superintendents, we wholeheartedly support a redesign of our accountability system, and we want that system to accurately and comprehensively measure and advance student learning and student progress. And we want to be certain that it does not result in bias towards students in any demographic, and that it utilizes timely data that is actionable, so that educators can take action on. And so currently, we take the test in April. We don't get the results until late summer. We've already done the planning for the next school year, because you do that work in June. You get May and June, and we want a system. I support a system where we're gathering data on a more frequent basis, and data that's accurate, that educators can take action on. And we also want a system that holds school districts and schools and educators to a high level of expectation and a high standard. We believe that in order for Colorado to have a premier education system in this country, that we also must have it is meaningful for our communities, that our accountability system must evolve. It needs to change. It's a pretty archaic system. Stacy cautioned me today about using those words, but if you look at what some other states in the country have done around accountability, their systems are far more sophisticated than ours. They don't rely primarily on one test. This test is 2/3 of the predictor of student achievement and of school accountability. So we believe that a world-class accountability system should hold all school districts to a high standard. It should promote high expectations for all students and allow comparability, while also providing flexibility that supports local control, so that you have the flexibility as a Board of Education to determine the assessments and the data pieces that are most meaningful to you, to inform you about your school community and how they are performing here. And then we also believe that the system must provide accurate and timely assessment of the performance of schools and school districts in order to be embraced by the educational community and garner the trust of our community stakeholders and drive improvement. And so to this point, currently students can opt out of the test, right? So if we have a portion of our students opting out, then we're really not getting accurate data on how our students are doing across the system. Because if we have 10% of our students opt out, or whatever that number may be, and in some school districts it's a far greater number than that, we're not getting an accurate picture of how students are really performing throughout the state of Colorado and across schools, across the district or across the state. So one of the things we talked about as a team of superintendents is, who is the accountability system for? Well, we believe it's for our students, our families, and our communities. We believe it should drive growth and achievement for all students. We believe it should ensure they are equipped for the future that they will experience, and that the accountability system has pieces in it that require us to be equipping students for the future. And so right now, our current accountability system has a very, very strong emphasis simply on literacy, language arts, and language arts assessment. And we know how important that is, but students being ready for their future is far bigger than performing well on a language arts assessment. It's far larger than that. We believe that in our state, the accountability system should create a comparability, so we can look across similar demographics and across the state and determine where the support should be targeted from the state of Colorado. And we have been a benefactor of supports from the state of Colorado, from the Colorado Department of Ed, and so here in District 6, staff and I would be supportive of us still being a benefactor of that. And then we believe that the system is for our districts and our schools, that it should drive improvement in instruction, and it should help us to address the needs of every student in our schools. And so what would a redesigned accountability system accomplish? Well, we believe it would demand high expectations for all students, teachers, staff, and administrators. It would drive improvement in student learning through timely feedback. Again, we do not support simply a one-time test. We would recommend ongoing assessment, local assessment that is standardized and national, is what we would recommend, I think, as a superintendent group. We would also recommend other measures, like the measures that you currently see in the graduation competencies. We believe it would optimize instructional time, so that you're not, it's a part of day-to-day instruction and week-to-week instruction. You're not carving out a few weeks in the springtime to just assess how students are doing. We believe it would provide for full-year measurements in student learning. It would recognize the importance of accelerated growth for below grade level students and continued growth for at and above grade level students. We believe this is so important, especially as the state has moved to lesser emphasis on growth. So they drop down.
So currently it's 60% at the elementary and middle, and it would drop to 55%.
Yeah.
And then at the high school, it's at 40%. It would drop to 35.
Yeah. So what we see in the state is decentivizing around growth, which in a district like ours, where we're never going to get to student achievement without significant student growth. And so what we have seen in the schools that we have turned around, schools that were in turnaround and now are at performance, what we've seen is you first see that growth, and it really incentivizes staff and administrators and students to keep doing that work because they're seeing that growth grow. And then you begin to see the student achievement follow right behind that. We also believe that the system should remove demographic bias in a school and in district accreditation ratings, and it should create accuracy and transparency so people can understand it. Like you saw me, I've been doing this work for over a decade with this system, and I have to turn to Stacy and say, now what percentage is it now? You know, so it's a very complex system. And what should an accountability system include? Well, we believe it should include measures that have stability to measure growth over time. We believe it should include a broad spectrum of measures to assess growth and performance. So not just one tool, not just CMAS or PSAT or the ACT, but a broad spectrum of measures. And we're not saying get away with those kind of measures, go away from them, but we're saying that we need more than just that blunt tool to really make a difference. We believe that it should have alignment with the Colorado essential skills. It should have viable measures that recognize and incentivize instructional and career programming that creates and develops a robust workforce pipeline designed to meet the demands and needs of Colorado's business, corporate, and manufacturing industries. I will tell you there are states, not Colorado, there are states that do this really well, where there's far more emphasis on workforce readiness than what Colorado puts on it in terms of their accreditation rating and their accountability system. So there are models out there that we could look to that would help us to do a much better job of that than we currently do now in Colorado. And then it should include a public reporting system that accurately and transparently reflects data measures in a format that is easy for stakeholders to access and understand. So any of you who've tried to go to the CDE website and have tried to hunt and sort through those tabs to figure out how we're really doing, you understand, I think you would understand the concern that we have, that we need a system that is easy for stakeholders to access, and you can understand it when you're looking at it. Proposing an accountability report card. So for English language arts and math, growth and performance, we would recommend that that we develop a common scale score based on the Colorado academic standards, that we correlate nationally recognized assessments to that scale score, and that we allow districts to use an improved and correlated assessment that is most meaningful for their needs. Now, we didn't just dream this up. This is actually happening in other states, and there's a couple of very small districts here in Colorado who have tried this, and who've been given permission to try this. Marino is one of those districts, and they have seen some success with that. The reality is we are far too large for us to try to do that on our own without a state system to do it for us. I mean, it's just not possible in a system this large. We believe that the accountability report card should address the Colorado essential skills, and that we should be given recognition for our success and performance on the Colorado essential skills. And then we believe that it should have district-specific measures that assess the impact of district initiatives. So that, I think that's really important. That's, you know, the Board of Education is saying, here's what we've identified in our strategic plan as our initiatives. Okay, Superintendent Pilch, how are we measuring those? And we demonstrate that, and then we believe that should be a part of the accountability system. Right now, our local data and how we measure our local initiatives has very little impact to none on our accountability ratings at the building level. And then we believe it should include post-secondary readiness, so college, career, and workforce readiness. And we believe that should be much larger than just the PSAT or the SAT. That it should look at enrollment in concurrent enrollment courses, that it should look at grades and test scores in concurrent enrollment. We believe it should have a higher weighting on the credentialing and the certification for workforce and workforce readiness for career technical education. So there's the report. I know there's a lot there, and I know it's pretty high level, and then sometimes a little bit in the weeds too in a few places. What I really had hoped for tonight was to get you up to speed with kind of some of the work that we're doing statewide, or at least through the Front Range, with superintendents, and then I want to make sure that I'm not getting too far out there from where the Board of Education would want us to be in terms of influencing this work. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions or hear your comments, and Stacy's here to back me up.
I have one. Could you go back? Is it one or two screens? One more, I think it was. So where it says viable measures, and you say there's other states that are doing things that are showing positive results and whatnot. What are some of the examples of what they're doing? And
So I think the simplest things to understand are like the credentialing for career and technical education. So the certificates and credentialing for career and tech ed. Also following workforce, so actual workforce placement. So once you've got the credential, then actually tracking, so post-secondary tracking of where your students are going into the workforce, and then the school district is basically getting a rating based on how many of their students are being placed, say, into the skilled workforce or into college. Right now, we get that data so late in Colorado that there's no way to incorporate, for example, post-secondary attendance into the state accountability system. Also, another area in here that could be looked at would be portfolio, so that students would be keeping a portfolio with resume, job applications, performance evaluations in the workplace, their credential they've earned, letters of recommendation that are written by their teachers in those areas they're credentialed in, or by their employer who they've been employed with, and that becomes a part of a portfolio then that the district then scores, and that score becomes a part of their state accountability rating. So those are some things that I have seen in other states.
So is Colorado looking to adopt some of those?
No, Colorado is not looking to do any of this. Okay. That's why the superintendents have come together. Okay. Because there is no one in Colorado is leading this other than, so folks in the workforce are worried about this. Mm-hmm. So there's this business roundtable group that we're a part of. They're very worried about that there's all this emphasis on one statewide test when really what they need are people ready for the workforce. They don't need people ready for the CMAS.
And I want to just add clarity to what you're saying in our current accreditation for high schools and well as for the district. There is the matriculation rate where we do look at students matriculating to two-year or four-year institutions, as well as the military and career and tech ed. What it doesn't take into account, so I just want to be clear, it does have a small part in this 30% category, but it does not take into account any of the concurrent enrollment that our students are taking currently, or any of those credentials
well, and
that
it's
they're
not
working
real time.
toward. No.
It's not real-time data. It's a year behind.
Late. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a year behind. So to be clear,
yes.
We, as a group of this superintendent's roundtable that we also are privileged to be a part of. It's a small number of superintendents and some significant business leaders in Colorado are coming together around workforce and around education in Colorado. So that group is having these conversations, but really this is the reason I bring this to you tonight is to ensure that I'm on the right path in joining in this work as superintendents begin to work with our lobbyists and our legislators and our professional organizations to push this work forward. Because this might come out of the audit. They might say we're going to have a group look at this, but quite frankly, we've been talking about this since I became a superintendent in District 6 8 years ago, and very little has changed. And so those of us who are older as superintendents and have been doing this a while now, we are getting impatient, and we're ready to take the lead on this and to push this forward. And really beautiful thing is that we have some of superintendents who've come from other states where they served as a deputy superintendent in another state where they have experienced other systems. And so those superintendents are also really taking a lead in this with us because they've experienced some of this in other states like Georgia and Alabama and places where they're doing a better job than we are.
I have a question. So if the accountability system were to change, is that something that has to come through the legislation, or is it CDE or the state board?
Nate's on his so I believe it will require legislative action. So CDE obviously is going to have to endorse it and make, we got to have CDE with us because they've got the ears of the legislators. But I believe it will take legislative action. I mean, CDE can only make policy after legislators have taken action, and they can make, like they can recommend the graduation guidelines and the graduation competencies, but really policy only occurs at this level and the state legislative level. They're, unless they are directed by the legislators to implement something. Is that fair, Nate?
That's an accurate statement.
Well, I just concur with that. It's been a problem and something discussed, well, at least for 4 years for me as well, and as a parent, as well, if your child isn't a great test taker. I just spoke with a friend of mine who teaches in our district. She has 5th graders, and she said she had to do NWEA because that's a window. Is that correct? Like, you have to give it this week. And this week, the kid has been sick, or mom has a new job, or something really disruptive at home is happening, and she's just like, I know she's not going to do well, and she's going to drop, and then that is the data that follows this kiddo. It follows the school. It follows her as a teacher, even though she's pretty sure if she, can give it in 2 weeks or after the break, the child would, potentially do much better. So
the good news about that is that there will yet be one more window of testing, unlike the state test, because this is a local assessment. So unlike the state test, where if you're sick the week of the state test, you're done.
Yeah.
There will be another window where this child will get to test again before the end of the year and demonstrate their progress.
yeah. And I would say there's also wide support across the whole state, because it is always a standing resolution for the CASB resolutions that the state accountability system be revamped and relooked at.
And I believe it hasn't been because this is so hard, and it
It's
is
really
so
big.
complex, and it is so big. And so it is truly a thing of beauty that that list of all those school district superintendents have said, yes, I am comfortable with what we have here and with pushing this forward. Because part of the issue has been getting school districts to, the leaders of the districts to agree on what they would like to see in the system. So we've done some really hard work to get to that place.
I wondered if you could speak a little more about, I can't remember what the exact language was, but how you can kind of determine what the demographics of the school are, how they're going to score. Because I do find it interesting that some of our, I don't know if they're all Title I, but Madison took a huge leap up, Scott, Shawsheen, so that's really exciting that, students with our higher levels of poverty or English language learners have done well. And so what do you think?
Yes, they have, and with the current accountability system as a district, we will never reach performance as long as growth continues to count at a lower percentage. Because we know that student achievement on a standardized test tracks directly with poverty throughout the country. Now there are places where we're overcoming that. We've done it here in District 6, and poverty is real, and children of poverty are going to come to us at a place of greater need for learning, and they're going to need more intervention and more time to get to where their peers who have not lived in poverty for the first 3 or 4 years of their life are going to be when they start school. What else would you say to that, Stacey?
I think that the big thing around that is that the additional part of this and why it factors the way it does, and we see it time and again, year after year. You can line up school districts' demographics. You can line up how they perform on these tests. Almost correlates one-to-one. It's been done over and over again. Part of that is because it's one test. It's, as you were describing, we're not looking at multiple measures in this current accountability system. We look at one measure, and they essentially slice and dice that. I counted it up today again, so I was prepared. 11 different ways for literacy, and 10 different ways for math. The same assessment, they just look at and put it in the pot that many different times for us to look at it, and that's part of the whole points that you're getting that come to the final accreditation rating. So with one assessment, given at one point in time, it's just looking at it. You can.
But you can't see, you only have that opportunity for growth. What we like about NWA
Correct.
is we have 3 assessments throughout the year. And so we can actually see if an individual student or a cohort of students is actually growing and achieving. Because it's not a one-time fluke.
So
It's
would we get to
less
simply
likely.
use NWEA as a standard? Or do
Well,
get-
that would be what we would advocate for. There's
Yeah.
other assessments like iReady that some districts
Yeah.
use. There's,
Well, even you think about your graduation
Yeah.
guidelines as a really good example of how many different assessments that we can use to show a student's competency toward graduation, where this does not. This looks at the one measure. But we could look at, say, in high school, you could look at AP or IB assessment. You could maybe look at work keys. That is currently in our graduation guidelines. So there's multiple different assessments. Currently in the state of Colorado for accreditation, it's one.
and I want to be clear, none of us are advocating
No.
for less accountability or for somehow hiding low student achievement. That is not what we're advocating at all. What we're advocating for is multiple measures that really tell us the story so that we best know how to activate our resources to address the need. A big part of what happens now, as you know, if you've had children in the system, is there's a great deal of teaching to the test, the 1C math test, or that occurs. And as a result, there are other things that are not happening in that classroom and might be being measured by us locally, but they're not happening at the same level of emphasis as teaching for that test might be happening.
I would also say that this is in line with our I-2030 and our mission, vision, and values, that we have an individualized learning plan for every student, and so we should be measuring that individualized learning plan in an individualized way, right? Yeah.
Has there been any communication with institutions of higher learning?
So that's interesting. We have not, as superintendents yet, included them in this conversation. I do not know if they were a part of the audit. There were 2 retired superintendents who were a part of this statewide audit. No current sitting superintendents, but I don't know what the role of higher ed has been in this. We do know that what we're hearing from higher ed is it's far more than that standardized test. It's
Right. Institutions of higher learning in
Yeah.
Colorado do not use SAT or ACT
Right.
very, very much
Right.
in determining who's accepted or who receives scholarships.
Right.
I mean, as some other
Right.
states do.
They're primarily looking at the coursework that students have taken and have they taken the most rigorous path that they could take.
Right. So they're looking at they're looking at something different as well. It seems like the state of Colorado, our businesses are asking for something different, our colleges are asking for something different.
Correct.
Our school systems want something different. It's really only the state that's locked into something that seems, as you say, archaic.
Yeah, and I think it is because it's so complex and so hard. It is, and so it is going to take leadership from somewhere to figure this out. Colorado Department of Ed, the governor's office, the legislators, or the school superintendents, whomever that might be. It's going to take significant leadership to figure this out.
How challenging would it be to reach out to like Ames and UNC, because I know they have your entry-level exams you have to take to see where your placements are, to see are you college ready?
Yeah,
or are you taking
not
remedial
challenging
classes?
at all, Mrs. Sullivan. I actually meet with Dr. Feinstein and Dr. Bornstein every month we meet regularly and are having those conversations on a regular basis.
Could we get
So
the
not-
data then to see where our incoming students are for this, like, last year?
Yeah, I just need to know what it is you're asking for, and then we can put it together for you all. I just need to know what it is exactly you're asking.
Okay, so if we took our high school graduates that are moving on into Ames Community College or UNC when they take those placement tests, like, what's the percentage of those
Oh,
students
yeah,
that
we
are
have that
taking
data.
remedial classes versus are they actually
Yeah.
taking college level?
Yeah,
or
we have
are
that
they
data.
prepared?
We have that data. For those courses of study that use that. Not all courses of study are using those, but we do have that data.
Any other questions, guys?
So what are your next steps, or kind of where are you with this? Where is the group with this process?
That's a good question. So the next thing that, my next step is, I'm going to share this with DAC, the District Accountability Committee, next month, and hear their reaction to this, and then our district leadership team. And then we'll come back together as a superintendent team, and I think we'll work with legislators. And so right now we believe that we have 2 legislators that are willing to carry a bill around this, to a bill that would say a state accountability system should do something like this, and this is how you put a team together to figure this out. So our hope is to get it in front of the legislature this year. We'll see what happens. I think depending on what comes out of the audit, that could influence this, but I didn't want you all caught off guard or surprised by any of this as you're hearing about it, and I will certainly keep you up to speed on it. And as you think it through and you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and so I've got your voice in my head.
To be clear, we don't have to gather a lot more data, correct? We just want the state to build a system that incorporates the data that we are already collecting from NWEA or
Right.
Whatever
Right.
else it is in terms of certificates, industry certificates, or
And we want a system that has a way to upload all that is manageable and user-friendly, so it's transparent and people can understand it and see it. I do believe it's going to take legislative action to direct the Colorado Department of Ed to direct a team to build this.
all right. Any other questions, guys? Thank you, Dr. Phillips. That's very exciting, very informative.
Fingers crossed, we'll keep it moving.
Next up on our agenda is review of regulation BEDH-R, and we're running a little behind. So you guys all have this in front of you. Take a look. We're not changing a lot, and this does not require a vote to change this. We want everyone to be aware and have a chance to speak into this. But we did go back and look at CDE's regulations and just tightening some of this up. Take just a second and look it over. Any questions? I mean, hopefully everybody's had a chance to look it over. We will be going back to simply one time of speaking. We will eliminate the end time and allow everyone to speak for 3 minutes during the ahead of our action items, so that people have the chance to speak into our business, but just having the one time to speak.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Pappas.
I am just wanting to reinforce the fact that there are some identified places in this regulation that say that there may be out of order situations, and I just wanted to remind the board that while we rely on you to monitor that, the rest of the board members can also monitor that, and that it is our responsibility as a school board to set the culture in the boardroom. And so if there are times that are deemed to be out of order, that we also can bring that to your attention and bring that forward.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Pappas. And you don't have to punch the button to speak. You know, our microphones are always live. You can just speak right in. If someone you believe is out of order, just direct the question to me and say, I believe the speaker is out of order. And so that is helpful. There's not much that's changed on this regarding that. Again, it must be appropriate for kindergarten through 12th grade. Speakers should be mindful of profane or obscene remarks, appropriate for an audience with kindergarten through 12th grade. So we have that on there twice. Cheering, snapping, clapping, other distractions are not allowed also. So just want to try to have a more civil discussion than we've had in some board meetings. And so we keep kind of tweaking this to get it a little bit better. Any questions, guys? Comments? All right. Well, then we will move right along to our financial audit presentation.
Mrs. Sponsler and Mrs. Hydock. So not only is it the holiday season, it is audit season. And those of us who sit on boards know that this is the time of year that you're hopefully have a complete audit and you're getting your audit report. I'm happy to welcome Ms. Sponsler and Ms. Hydock, and I'll let you introduce our guest tonight and open up if you would, please.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Coach. As you mentioned, this is audit season, and we are very glad to be at the tail end of audit season, at least for our district. It feels like this goes on longer than not, I guess, that we are under audit, but not a bad thing. We always appreciate having other eyes look at our work and making sure that we are doing things the way that we are supposed to be doing them. So we, again, have contracted with Clifton Larson Allen as an independent audit firm. They come in and they start work basically in June with some preliminary audit work, and then that goes on until about now. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to John Paul. He is our auditor. You met him, most of you met him last year. We do have a few new faces around the table. So with that, John Paul, I know you have a presentation that you'll go through and then have time at the end for questions.
Sure. So again, my name is John Paul LeChevalier with Clifton Larson Allen. I've never heard anyone call audit season the most wonderful time of the year, but it kind of seems appropriate now. So I'm gonna try it out and see if that works. But so I do have a couple of slides to go through some of the results of the audit. But if there are any questions, either on something in the slides or anything that you've seen within the deliverables that were handed out, please let me know. I'd be happy to kind of take questions at any point in the presentation, so please feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so have an agenda with a couple of items, but we'll just get straight into walking through the results of the audit. So we do have again, the financial statements have been now finalized, and so that's what's being presented. Within that includes our independent auditor's report near the beginning of the financial statements, which has what we referred to as an unmodified, or informally a clean audit opinion, which is the highest level of audit report that you can receive, and it is the type of audit report that you should be expecting to receive. So if you weren't going to receive that type of audit report, this would not be the first meeting that you'd be hearing this at. It would be something that would be brought up, and it would be a significant issue or discussion. So along with that, that audit report does include a little bit of information about what we do as part of the audit and our responsibilities as auditors. So our responsibility as auditors is to make sure that the amounts included within the financial statements are materially correct and that they fairly present the financial information of the district. What that means is that the district still takes responsibility for those financial statements, and it's still the district's responsibility for also setting the internal controls to have that structure to be able to record all of the financial information appropriately throughout the year. And again, that's reasonable assurance. So we're not looking through absolutely every single transaction. We do have a number of different types of audit procedures, sampling methodologies, statistical analysis, things that we look at to make sure that the financial information is prepared accurately with a material perspective so that the board can rely on this information in terms of making decisions going forward. There are a couple of different components of the audit. So there's the financial statement audit, which is the vast majority of the actual financial statements. And then towards the back of the financials, there's what we refer to as the single audit, which is an audit over federal awards. So this is a required, anytime an entity receives more than $750,000 in federal awards, they're required to go through this single audit that the federal government puts out guidelines each year of how auditors are supposed to audit these awards and what requirements they're supposed to check against. So as I'm sure you're all well aware, the federal government always has strings attached to the funding that they distribute and additional requirements that have to be followed. And so we, based on the guidance that they put out, we'll test different specific awards and agreements on kind of a rotating 3-year basis, or based on any significant dollars that were received outside of kind of that rotating basis. And so what we tested this year was the IDEA program, or relating to special education, and then also the ESSER funding. And so those two were the only ones that were required out of a number of different federal awards that the district does receive. So I guess to maybe cut to the chase, and we'll explain it in a little bit more detail in a minute, in terms of the financial statement audit, we did not have any written findings or recommendations. So kudos to the district on putting together and keeping a very well-run financial department and having all the internal controls in place, again, to get to that materially correct financial presentation. We did have one finding under the single audit, which again, we'll spend a couple minutes kind of walking through in just a minute here. Did outline there are a number of different sections within the financial statements. Some of these are audited, some of these are not audited. So did just want to point that out. The information that's outlined here is what is audited. So this is within the financial section. There's also an introductory section, which is more on kind of the qualitative things that have happened throughout the year. So not something that's part of a financial audit or kind of within that scope. And so that's unaudited. And then towards the end, there's a statistical section that gives 10 years of information that kind of is useful for trends. That's also not audited. Did also want to point out a little bit of the financial information, some of the trends that you'll see within the financial statements. Not going to go into a whole lot of detail again unless there's questions or something that you specifically wanted to discuss, but do always feel it important to bring up the net pension liability relating to para. This came about almost 10 years ago, which makes me start to feel a little bit old, that it's been that long since we kind of first had these discussions. But the net pension liability is para's unfunded liability. A portion of that relates to kind of if you took the district's contributions compared to all of the employer contributions into para, if you took that percentage and then multiplied it by the unfunded liability of para, that's what gets presented. That's not, so it's generally a very significant number. As you can see, for fiscal year 2022 is about $207 million, so very significant on the overall district's financial statements. This isn't something that the district could pay down or impact in any way. It's almost more informative in terms of the amount that's presented, but it does actually go onto the district's financial statements. So did just want to highlight that. As you can see in the trend, it has been going down, primarily based on changes in legislature, increased contributions, as well as a direct contribution that the state is making to para to try and pay down that liability. So again, you can see that it had a pretty significant spike. This does include a number of actuarial assumptions as kind of being the reason for that. But has decreased to $207 million. Still a significant amount, so if you kind of see that information on there, that's what that relates to. Hand in hand with that, did want to point out what's referred to as the net OPEB liability. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is a healthcare subsidy that is also offered by para to retirees. So if you see net OPEB liability, that basically is part of the pension information. So you can see those, kind of view them together. Again, it's $10 million presented as a liability in fiscal year 22, so much smaller than the $207 million discussed for pensions. Did also want to look at the general fund, the fund balance trend. So this would be the last 5 years, if you take the assets of the general fund less any of the liabilities as of the end of the year, this would be the amount that's presented. And you can tell by the different colors, part of that is restricted for specific use, primarily relating to Tabor, and that required 3% reserve, and then that kind of yellowish green color being the unassigned and what the district has available to spend. So seeing that has been increasing over the last 5 years, showing that the district is in a stronger financial position than it's been in over the last few years. In addition to just the general fund, this would be all of the governmental funds. Something to keep in mind as you're looking at this, you'll see that the amounts fiscal year 18 and 19 are much smaller, and then they go way up after that. The reason for this is that the district does present two sets of financials. One of them is on a current financial basis, similar to what you'd budget for. So when the district issued bonds, you have this large liability to pay off that bond, but you don't have to pay that within 1 year. You wouldn't budget for that entire liability, so you only show the principal and interest payments there, so that the bond proceeds are what's causing that significant increase in fund balance over the last couple of years. So that started dipping down, and then the district issued the remaining bonds, and that's why it increased again in fiscal year 22. Any questions? So that was about, I know that's, it's about 150 pages that I tried to do in about 3 slides. So if there's any questions, things that you wanted to discuss further, please feel free to let me know. If you want to think about it, we'll move into the single audit results. Okay. So in terms of the single audit, this is where, again, this is the federal awards and the specific federal requirements that the district has to follow in relation to that federal funding. So again, what we applied specific testing procedures over would be relating to IDEA for special education, as well as ESSER. ESSER is funded under the American Rescue Plan Act, so that's part of the COVID relief funding. I'm sure you've had plenty of conversations about ESSER funding, but just to reiterate, and we did have one finding relating to some of the ESSER dollars that were used. And so it's a bit complicated, so I'll try and kind of walk through the basics and kind of explain all the circumstances surrounding it. So what the finding is related to is what's referred to as the wage rate requirements, otherwise known as Davis-Bacon, which is the Davis-Bacon Act that caused is where these requirements come from. So Davis-Bacon came about in the early 1930s. It's a requirement for construction companies or contractors that they're required to pay laborers the prevailing wage anytime they're using federal funding. So basically, it's a minimum wage for construction workers anytime that federal funding is involved. This came about prior to the standard minimum wage requirements. And so that's kind of the overall purpose of it. It's very political, in my opinion. It came about as kind of a pro-union, anti-illegal immigrant, usage on federal construction projects. So that was kind of the point of it when it passed in the 1930s, and 90-ish years later still remains in effect. So that's where the requirement comes from. And so anytime still when construction work is being performed using federal dollars, they're required to follow the requirements of Davis-Bacon, meaning that they have to pay workers, electrician has to be paid the prevailing wage for a specific location. So it's uncommon for federal funding at school districts to be used on construction. Over the last 10 years, I think ESSER is the first federal award that I've seen that's actually been able to be used for construction. Most of the time it's not, which is why you're normally issuing bonds for a lot of significant construction. So it's not a common requirement to be looking at Davis-Bacon. So what happened for fiscal year 22, ESSER is able to be used for construction. The district passed through about $1 million in ESSER funding to university schools, one of the charter schools within the district, who then used that for building improvements. So part of that construction, which is then follow Davis-Bacon. The contractors that were engaged as part of the contract signed that they would follow Davis-Bacon. So they met that requirement. The other requirement is that they're supposed to fill out a certification that they paid all of their laborers or employees at that prevailing wage. And university schools did not receive those payroll certifications, and then the district didn't receive those payroll certifications. So I realize that was kind of a long, lengthy explanation for that, but overall, basically, there was supporting documentation that the contractor should have provided to university schools, which then should have been provided to the district, and that didn't happen. So that's what the finding related to. That doesn't mean that the construction contractor didn't pay their employees a prevailing wage. It means that there wasn't the supporting documentation that's supposed to be in place for that. So that is included within the financial statements. I think it's the 5th to last page. So if you were to flip through, you'd see kind of, again, a very brief explanation of what I just covered. But so that's what's included within the financials. So that was the one finding for this year. Any questions or comments on that item?
I don't know if you guys are all aware of prevailing wage and what that means to us, but like from the construction and like private sector, it's especially with federal dollars, it's usually something unions have negotiated with federal stuff so that, because theirs are kind of like our agreement, the contract with the teachers association, they set a wage for their unions. So federal dollars, they make them certify that you're doing prevailing wage so that the private sector doesn't have an unfair advantage of being cheaper. So that it's really common in the construction and private sector to, if you're on like a government job, to pay prevailing wage just so that everybody's on the same plateau. So that's all this was, is they didn't certify that they were there. But it's really common in construction, especially non-union jobs.
Is there a way to fix that? Is there a ramification? Is there?
Sure. So I guess some of the, in terms of the ramifications of that, in terms of our audit procedures, reporting it is kind of the end of what we do. It would be up to CDE or the U.S. Department of Education if they were to follow up on this. That's obviously up to them on what they intend on doing. Generally, when the district's not the first entity to have a finding over Davis-Bacon and the wage rate requirements in general, what we've seen is potentially a little bit of additional monitoring. They come in and ask for, okay, it wasn't available for the audit. Can you follow up and get those certifications now, even after the fact, or something to kind of, or do you have a process in place to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future? That type of thing would be generally what you kind of expect in terms of kind of next steps, but obviously that would be up to them in terms of what they intend to do.
Thank you, John Paul. Chief Financial Officer Megan Sponsor and I have talked about this, and so I'd like her to share what the steps or actions of the district will be as a result of this audit finding.
Sure. I think in this case, it's actually a pretty simple thing to put in place going forward. Obviously, we will require that we have that documentation in hand before we reimburse any of our charter schools for construction projects. And then for our own construction projects, we will definitely make sure that we have those in hand before we request reimbursement from CDE. So in terms of findings, this one is pretty simple to correct. It's just that, as was noted, this is unusual for school districts to follow these rules. So this was kind of something that caught us a little bit off guard. And we've been trying so hard to stay on top of all the ESSER requirements, but this one just slipped by. So we definitely will learn and move forward with this knowledge going forward.
And Mrs. Sponsor, it's my understanding that University Schools Administration have been made well aware of this concern. And do we know if the contractor has been made aware as well?
Yes, they have. University has been working with their contractor and subcontractors to obtain this information. The last I knew, they had some of it, maybe not all of it, but we will continue to make sure we get that.
So we believe that the Davis-Bacon Act was actually followed, and we're waiting for that documentation to come in to demonstrate that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments?
This is a fairly small issue, right? It's not an egregious missing.
No, and
Yeah,
again,
small.
with the federal requirements are all black and white. Something's either done or it's not done. It's either a finding or it's not. There's not a lot of, how significant is something. It's either yes or no in terms of whether it goes into the report. And again, I mean, it would be more up to CDE to determine kind of their, how concerned they would be over it. But from our perspective, it's mainly documentation that the contractor has said that they are able, that they were going to follow and said that they were going to be able to provide, but by the end of the audit, still weren't able to provide that, so. And then we do have one of the letters that's was included with the financial statements that went to the board does outline all of our required communication. It's a very templated letter. If you compared it with last year, most of the words would be exactly the same because we're required to say it every year, so we do. I guess the only change really that was on there that I think is worth pointing out is that the district did implement GASB 87, or Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is the one that puts out changes in governmental accounting standards relating to leases, which meant that amounts that were currently just presented as an operating lease, so if you were, say, paying for copiers, and you just made those payments each month, now that's required to be presented almost as if you had gone out, gotten a loan for those copiers, and then were making principal and interest payments on it. Doesn't change the nature of the agreement at all, just changes the way that the financial statements are presented for that. Overall, for the district, not a significant change. But if you did see something in there, that's what that relates to. And then also would like to point out in the uncorrected and corrected misstatements, if you're looking for whether an audit was clean or not, if that section is lengthy, that's when you know that the audit was a problem. Even if it got to that kind of clean audit report, if you can see in the governance letter that there were a bunch of adjustments, that's where you kind of know whether things were a challenge or not. So kudos to the district for not having any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. Again, it's a challenge. It's a lot of things to go through, and so to not have any financial statement recommendations, again, just wanted to give kudos to the finance department and appreciate all of their help in getting us everything that we need to complete this year's audit. And again, so everything else is similar to previous years, so don't have anything else to share on that. So any questions?
Any questions, guys, for either for John Paul or Megan or Mandy? Dr. Pilch? I'm not hearing any. So again, thank you. It's always good to see you. Thank you for bringing this to us. Thank you. Kudos to you both, and to your team. It's just do such a fantastic job and keep us doing what we're supposed to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, on our agenda tonight, well, next to last, is our community engagement. So is there anything we need to be aware of that anyone knows we need to be aware of with regard to community engagement?
I'll share, President Matthews, for those of you who are members of Rotary, that the Greeley Downtown Rotary is being hosted at Greeley West High School on Wednesday. I think, President Matthews, if you wanted to join us, there would still be, there will probably be a lunch available for you, or you can have mine. But we are going to hold Rotary at Greeley West on Wednesday for the Downtown Club, and give those folks a chance to tour that building and get in the building. So should be a lot of fun.
So as new to the board, I RSVP'd for that as a Rotary member. Is that
Yep.
cool?
Yep, perfect. That is perfect. Mhm.
Anything else, guys, on community engagement? Or there's still concerts that you can attend tonight, tomorrow, probably. Lots of things you can get out to. All right, time for debrief. And normally go back around, but since Miss Campus Spitzy hasn't experienced this yet, Taylor, will you lead off again?
Where are you, Megan? Where is she? Oh, she stepped out. Okay, well, I was just gonna give her a big thank you for making sure that we were in compliance and whatnot with our reports, because I know she puts a lot of effort into those, and I know even just like the 3-ring binders we receive every year are full of it's a plethora of information, so I know she's got a very detailed job, and I appreciate what she puts into it. So
We'll pass that on to her.
pass it on, yes. But thank you. I like hearing these things.
It's fair to say this really is Mandy's side of the house.
Oh, okay.
You know, of course, Mandy reports to Megan and has her fingers all over it, but Mandy is the one who really takes lead on the audit piece.
Okay, well, thank her as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree with Taylor. Send thanks to the people that take care of the money. It's a big job, and obviously they're doing it right, and a lot of information in there. Glad that there's people out there that are smart enough to do that.
I also think Mandy and Megan, and just what I'm always struck with when we have these reports is just how well they know the mission, the vision, the programs, and the people that these dollars represent. So it helps them do a great job of taking care of the money and protecting the programs and the folks. Dr. Pilch, I also appreciate your presentation on the accountability system, and I mean, similar to how a board governs all of our ideas in one room, coming up with good solutions, similar to working with the superintendents and, you know, throughout pandemic or any different kinds of big decisions. I always appreciate when you bring back, well, here's what other districts are doing, and that's helpful. Like, here's what's working for them, here's what we definitely don't want to do, or, you know, but just added information and added minds around a difficult problem. So
Thank you.
Ms. Pappas?
I too appreciate always the audit, and appreciate Mandy and Megan very much for the intensive work that they do, comprehensive work that they do. Dr. Pilch, I know that I've said this before, but I appreciate your work with the Denver area superintendents. This is important and powerful work, and I know you mentioned it in your presentation, but I think it really sends a strong message with all of the superintendents that are involved in this process right now. So I thank you for being part of it.
Thank you. I should have added that Erin Kane, the superintendent in Douglas County, and we're reaching out to the Colorado League of Charter Schools and the Charter School Institute. Both of our districts are pretty charter school friendly, and we want to bring the league and the institute into this conversation, and do believe that they would be very interested in the direction that this is headed.
Mr. Bentley?
Yeah, kind of a repeat of the same. I think I might have a fair bit of financial statement background with the business and stuff, but it's an understatement saying how monumental this task is for the amount of dollars and the amount of paperwork that they've done. This is probably the highlight of the year for them, just to come with a little tiny thing. It's almost, you know, it's a little, they made a molehill out of a mountain, not the other way around. and that's good in the financial department. So kudos to Mandy and Megan. It's really impressive, because that's not something that's easily done or quickly or something that should be taken lightly. So it pays dividends in the community, I think, to have them trust us with their dollars as much as they do. So other than that, I'm just kind of excited for the final run of the 2022 season and Christmas. So Merry Christmas.
Brenda?
Yeah, so just want to echo what everyone said. The fact that the only finding was something, you know, it was federal funds for construction, which is kind of unprecedented, and that Megan already outlined a very simple way to avoid that ever happening again. I'm getting to know the teams, but our financial team just seems so effective, and I'm also really excited about Dr. Pilch's role in the Superintendent's Council. As my fellow board members know, I've had a rocky path when it comes to standardized testing, and I'm a firm believer that a one-time test does not say enough about a student or a district or a school or a teacher. And so I know it's probably the easiest way to rate schools and districts, but it's not the most holistic way. And I think our district deserves to get credit for all the other work that we do. And so I'm excited that you guys are really pushing the boundaries on that. Very difficult conversation, but a very necessary change that, like Michael Matthews had pointed out, has already happened in secondary education, and we're seeing it happen in even the medical world. We have standardized tests there that we are now just doing pass, no pass on, and just being able to look at students and schools in a more comprehensive, broader way. So I'm really excited that you're part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. Certainly appreciate Mandy and Megan, and not just this audit, but audit after audit after audit that they do so well, and always clean audits. And I don't know if our public necessarily is always paying attention to us this time of year and on this particular thing, but it's a very important piece of what we do as a school system, and they do it very well. And couldn't be more excited to see us make some changes at the state accountability system, and to take advantage of all the data that we have on our kids and on this system, and to move away from a one snapshot, one day, one test. So that's super exciting. Thank you, Dr. Pilch, and I just want to say I appreciate Kyle Bentley's jacket. And also something that needed to be mentioned. So I think that is everything, guys. And we're adjourned from our work session, and we'll see everyone back at 6 o'clock for a business meeting.